यहाँलाई फेरि पनि स्वागत छ ग्यालेक्सी दिस मर्निङ लाइभमा र अघि हामीले सृजना हामीले आज हाम्रो एकदम विशेष अतिथिलाई निम्त्याएका थियौँ त भनेका थियौँ तर उहाँ देखिनु भएको छैन।
हजुर, उहाँको बारेमा हामीले यहाँलाई फोटोग्राफ पनि देखायौँ होला र उहाँसँग कुरा गर्नुभन्दा अगाडि उहाँको बारेमा तयार पारेको एउटा इन्ट्रोडक्टरी भिडियो हेरौँ होला।
डाक्टर सुरज एङ्गडे दलित अधिकार अभियन्ता हुनुहुन्छ। सन् 1988 मा भारतको महाराष्ट्रमा जन्मिएका सुरजले अफ्रिकाबाट अफ्रिकन अमेरिकन स्टडिजमा पीएचडी गरिसक्नु भएको छ भने अक्सफोर्ड विश्वविद्यालयबाट कास्ट एन्ड रेसमा अर्को पीएचडी सिद्ध्याउने क्रममा हुनुहुन्छ। हार्वर्ड विश्वविद्यालयमा सिनियर फेलोको रूपमा अध्ययन अध्यापन गरिरहेका डाक्टर एङ्गडेद्वारा लिखित पुस्तक कास्ट म्याटर्स अत्याधिक रोचाइएको पुस्तक हो भने डाक्टर एङ्गडे अर्को विख्यात पुस्तक द रेडिकल इन अम्बेडकरका सह-सम्पादक पनि हुनुहुन्छ। त्यसबाहेक डाक्टर एङ्गडेले जात जाति जातीय अध्ययन र श्रम बसाइसराई लगायत विषयमा विभिन्न भाषाहरूमा 150 बढी निबन्ध लेख र पुस्तक समीक्षाहरू प्रकाशित गर्नु भएको छ। भारतका प्रमुख स्कलर र ग्लोबल एक्टिभिस्टको छवि बनाइसकेका विख्यात लेखक मानवाधिकार कर्मी तिनै डाक्टर सुरज एङ्गडे आजको हाम्रो अतिथि हुनुहुन्छ।
एकदमै हाम्रो अतिथि आइसकेमा चाहिँ हामी उहाँलाई स्वागत गर्छु। Dr. Suraj, welcome to our show. Good morning and namaskar.
Namaskar to you, Srijana and Samir. Thank you for having me.
So how are you?
I am still waking up, but I am also quite excited to be here and talking to you and also to the viewers who are also probably awakened by now.
So what brings you in Nepal? Like how Nepal is treating you? Tell us something about yourself.
You know, Nepal has been a very beautiful place. Especially the people are very kind. They surpass the stereotype that Indians in India have about Nepal. It's often not a very positive connotation. When I was in India, when I would think about Nepal, because it is often associated with a certain ethnic group, be it the Gorkha people or specific tribes that people who are migrating to work. So it's often a class-based appreciation of certain Nepali culture. But then I was here in 2019 and it really humbled me that how phenomenal this. More importantly, I found there was liberalism existing in Nepali society compared to India. And what I found on streets was the men, women, the relations were not really coded in a very certain setup. It appeared much more natural for people across the age group as well as gender. And of course, there is certain elements that are carried from within the across the border. So I can see much more influences, and here I've been hanging out with prominent Dalit right activists, and they've been one of the best hosts. So if any Nepali is missing Nepali hospitality, they ought to visit and hang out with some more Dalit activists. That's the true beautiful love. They hold you, and more importantly, they really think that more can be given than taken.
This time, what brings you to Nepal this time? Why are you here?
Well, I came because I been meaning to visit Lumbini. I have been very much inspired. I mean, in India, many of us, Dr. Ambedkar, converted in 1956 out of the Hindu fold to Buddhism, and he called it it's going to your own ancestral faith. And so I've been growing up hearing about Kapilvastu, hearing about Lumbini, but you know it's always in the stories. 2,300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500. You think about those. So this time, I just decided that I have to make the pilgrimage, so to speak, and I was very fortunate to be having an audience with the retired Lumbini Development Board's architect, who took me around.
I see.
And you know the locations where Buddha, Kapilavastu's capital, where we hear 29 years he spent, and then of course he renounced, and then there are relics of Buddha was told there are 7 places where the relics were kept when the Lord Buddha passed away. One of that is kept in a stupa. Ashoka made it. That was never opened because the local tribes said, please don't open this. So the 6 stupas where they were relics, they opened. So one is still. So it was a very vibrant experience for me to be here and see how Buddhist culture and Buddhist philosophy is growing, and many people. I see so many. I mean, Lumbini is a great place, and still there's a lot of infrastructure. But then, we did an interesting thing. We decided to go via road. And because we wanted to go by Chiton and few other places, and I spent some time with the Gandharva community, the Dalits. So beautiful. They live in this next to the Valmiki Reserve park, and they have doing collective farming. And then they were singing, dancing, and I was like, this is the vibrancy of colors, voice, tones, music, dance. I mean, they are sweating, and within that sweat, they are also bringing out this fragrance of the community. And of course, then the roads were something that I not recommend anybody to.
That's what we have been talking about.
And then on my way back, I just sent the car. I took a flight and came. I'm sorry, I couldn't do
Smart
nothing.
move.
Yeah,
Smart
that's
move.
very
Trust me.
smart.
Smart move.
That's very smart. So, Suraj, tell us something about yourself. Like, you are a most highly educated person among the Dalits. So, how it is possible?
Srijana, I mean, see, it never went out to be the story it is. I grew up in a slum in India, and when we talk slum, we have to maximize it with number of people, right? Like it's the density is
Where exactly in India?
So it's in Maharashtra, in a place called Nanded. Now Nanded is among the 250 most backward districts of India.
Right.
And so because the nearest big hospital, if you get emergency, was 6 hours. So you have to, but it had what we call a district level facility, but certainly not the kind of things. The only medium of transportation that we relied was that one line of railway that went from that inner hinterland to the capital of Bombay on the west coast.
Right.
And so the life story in this sense was very much predicated on growing around poverty. My family grew up what they call not just poverty, below poverty line, BPL. And so whoever are from the BPL family, they have less than, now I don't know, it's $2 per day income. And so you have to survive by that. And so added with that, there is what we call spatial segregation, space, if you are living in a certain neighborhood. And this was a Dalit neighborhood. And so for me to kind of think about doing something in life, you have no one to look up to. See, a child, for example, if you give a child proper nurturing, it's like creating a sculpture. If you add a proper attention, and then you can really create a beautiful art, or else you might just break it or you might just damage it. So children are very much like those clay models that are under preparation. And so for me, there was hardly, because my friends were, people I grew up with were very much in gang violence. At one point I was in a gang violence. I had my own gang. We would do, because that was the only way we thought, because we did not know. For example, I went to a good school, but my classmates never spent time with me after school. So I did not know that my classmates are having what they call after school hours, where the kids are going to each other's house, or there is some party, birthday party. I was never invited.
I see.
So I did not even know. So for me, the 6 hours that I spent in my school were the most glorious time of the day. Because after that, I came back, and then it was a house made of a tin shade roof. It was hot. If it's raining, it will pour down. So I saw school alive, which was children of collectors, police chief, business people, people from various varieties. And I was in a way a very exception there, because I didn't really belong to that, right? And so how would you identify the differences at the lunch when you open your tiffin box? You see what I mean? And I would see my friends are having this amazing pakwan. And my food was basically my mother trying to put some some sabji and some roti and just and so for me every lunch I would look out to eat my friend, because that for me was a moment to experience good life,
Right.
experience a what we call deliciousness, or here it was less salt, less, but now we appreciate that for health reasons.
Yes.
So, but you see, that's how the life was, and it's only later. And so you see, when you grow up realizing that wherever you walk, it's gonna be a roadblock, or if you're walking, people are going to suspect you. So you live a life of a potential convict, because you don't know what wrong you're going to do. Am I touching it right? Am I looking it right? Am I acting it on right? What's it that's might be potentially put me under scanner? And anybody in society, right from the chaprasi to the boss, would have the right to scold you. So this is the level of hierarchy where nobody will bother to check on you, but everybody will bother to harass you. You see?
But how did you, the question is, how did you break through that though? I mean, understandably it's a severe situation, not exactly the best situation to be in.
Correct.
But what made you different from other similar colleagues of your, let's say from the Dalit community?
Correct.
You broke through. What was it? Why?
I mean, one of the thing was, the fortunate thing for the Indian Dalit community is that they have someone to look up to, Dr. Ambedkar.
Right.
Now you see, Dr. Ambedkar was somebody, of course, great leader. One of the last speeches he gave was
Drafted the Constitution.
He drafted the Constitution.
Constitution, yes.
And he had 2 PhDs.
Right.
One Columbia, and we're talking about 1913 he went to Columbia. Like, that's the era where very rarely people from our part of the world went at all to Western capital, right? And even if they went there, they went for 1 degree.
Right.
Ambedkar ended up getting 4 degrees. And he went enrolled for 3rd PhD in Germany to study Sanskrit and Hindu literature. I mean, so so his photo was something that was only probably one of the inspirations for us, because around you is no inspiration. And so when he was living amongst us as a certain figure, mythical figure for us, because as a kids we don't know, but we thought that education, and so emphasis on education was very much. So my dad was basically a watchman, and he was a part-time chaprasi, a peon in a bank, a private bank. But he did one thing: he put me in a school where his boss, the manager, had put his child into the school.
Oh, that's great.
The best school. And that was probably a kind of an initial passport, not yet a visa, just a passport to that part. So for me to then get to where I was for me to constantly think that I am not made for this. The life that has been shown to me, people from my part of the world, what the aim is, and which is rightfully so, I would like to get a job, because that's your need. You need to provide for, and I was the elder, and you know how elder in our part of the world works.
Of course.
Take care of your siblings, your father is ailing, your mother is getting old, and doing that, but still thinking, I'm not made for this. So when I got my first job, I mean, I went to law school. My dad bribed me to go to law school, because in 12th is a changing point, at least in India.
Right.
I had 46 or 47%.
Oh.
So I couldn't get admission. I am so grateful that I did not have good marks.
Wow.
Or else I would have ended up becoming doctor or engineer and joined the labor market. I got less marks, so I could explore other avenues. In India, you either go to medicine or engineering. Law is somebody, when I told my friend I'm going to law, they started looking down on me because it's not valued, and but that's where I found my calling, and I thought science and all is not for me.
Right.
And then to kind of push out of it, because I was living in a neighborhood where many people were convicted, were criminals, were put in jail for different reasons.
Of course.
And there's a lot of violence is there, police incarceration, court would coming. So people from my neighborhood started appreciating that somebody amongst us is now going to wear the black coat and going to advocate for us. That was their kind of, and for me, during doing this, the inspiration, Dr. Ambedkar, he went abroad.
Right.
He went to do something. And me in a slum, thinking about going abroad, it's like you have to pay at least 40 lakh rupees Indian currency to think about doing anything. And how do I? But thinking itself of that nature is a big criminal act. Because you are challenging the norms of society.
Of course.
And whatever you challenge is considered blasphemous, and it can be convicted.
Right.
So for me, it was like, okay, let me just do it. And there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of pressure. People mocking you. People try to look down upon you. So every step I took, there were many people telling me why not to take that step. Very few people told me there is also a step after that step. For me, it was just living in that moment, not next and next. But that's what, if you have no resources, the one thing you can do is push back, be aggressive and audacious in claiming what you would like to have. Because it's not going to be an easy platter. You see what I mean? Nobody's going to come and tell you,
Right.
this is for you. And if you say something which might sound ridiculous, is exactly what you need to do, because ridiculousness is what your life has been. So you become more ridiculous for them, and then scale. And government of India, Maharashtra, my state, has a scholarship for Dalit students to pursue education abroad. Now that's the best thing that happened to me. I was paid full scholarship to go to Birmingham, law school, then PhD. Now I'm in my second PhD. The inspiration kind of continues.
Oh, that's very great. So we are going to take a small break.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to you after this break. This morning live program हेरिरहनु भएको छ Galaxy 4K मा र अब अहिले प्रोग्राममा एकैछिन ब्रेकमा जाने बेला भएको छ.
Galaxy This Morning Live co-sponsor Goodwill Finance Limited, financing for success since 1995. Wellness partner Tranquility Spa, balance your body, mind and spirit.
यहाँलाई फेरि पनि स्वागत छ ग्यालेक्सी दिस मर्निङ लाइभमा. हामीहरू डाक्टर सुरज येङ्देसँग कुरा गरिरहेका छौँ र उहाँ दलित हक अधिकारका अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय अधिकारकर्मी पनि हुनुहुन्छ भने विभिन्न किताबका लेखक पनि अथर पनि हुनुहुन्छ र हामीसँग उहाँसँग फेरि अरू कुराकानी गर्न गइरहेछौँ. Suraj, so coming back to our conversation, as I was listening to what you're saying, I drew parallels between what you went through, what you're thinking, and Black Lives Matter activism. People in the slums there, are going through the same kind of difficult situation, the challenges, and I see that from some of your other conversations that you kind of draw some connections with the Black Lives Matter movement. Can you tell us what made you join the two together?
Somewhere I remember, so in my house, so my the room, so 5 of us, my mother, father, and 3 of us children, grew up in one room house. And in that one room, in one corner, they put a black and white TV. The 14-inch TV of that time, And early morning, my dad would tune into this news, 7 o'clock, and that was his way to wake us up. He would create the loud voice. And one day, because my father was somebody who was an extraordinary person. I mean, he read. He was a vociferous reader, and he was somebody who could grasp what's happening. I mean, he was just 9th educated, 10th he got, but then,
Right.
the housing situation put him out. And so, during that time, during 1990s, United Nations announced the first black Secretary General, Kofi Annan.
Yeah, of course.
So my dad, I remember, invited me and say, look at that man. His name is Kofi Annan. And he is now the Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, I did not know nothing, but I remember the name Kofi Annan. And Kofi Annan became like, for me, something extraordinary person. I mean, when you have all European white-dominated kind of colonial structures working in around you, and you see Kofi Annan, but then the prehistory was that my father was somebody who was part of Dalit Panther movement. Now, Dalit Panther was something that was inspired by Black Panthers of the 1960s.
Okay, so that's the connection.
So Dalit Panther was radical movement of Dalits who fought against atrocities, who were trying to bring justice into the people, but they were beautiful poets and literary jargons, and they were just people who would just swim into the world of literature, but also activism. It was a beautiful era, 1970s. Around the world, student activism is also taking place, anti-war in Vietnam. So within that phase, my dad was somebody who was grasping that. And so for me, thinking about black people or black movement was a very natural occurrence. Okay. I was not really looking for it. It was something that was built into it. So it was kind of a fortunate move. And that's how I think the kind of flower was being created into this dungeon.
I see. Very interesting. Very interesting.
So Suraj, you are an author also. Tell us something about your books.
The latest one, the one you published.
And you are in the process of writing another books, right?
I'm right now in the process of writing 4 books. And the one work is now, it's called Caste, A New History of the World. So I'm looking at the new histories through the lens of caste. Because caste is not necessarily only a specific regional problem. It's a global problem. Right. And so Nepal, I hope to add some of this, and I was so phenomenally impressed by the amazing writers and thinkers from Nepal. I had an opportunity, and I'm reading one of probably my favorite writers out of Nepal is Ahuti.
Ahuti.
A brilliant writer. I read him, and he is so sharp, and he is so direct. And I was like, this guy needs to be known. And fortunately, I had an English translation of his text. But he has a very composite approach to not just problem of Nepal, but a problem of social injustice. And it's not just tokenist. He's trying to say, if you are trying to create a religion change, what's it going to be? If you're trying to make development change, what's it going to be? If you're going to make constitutional change. And then I was reading Jawahar Roka. Now we have leaders like Padam Sundas, and I was reading the history of T.R. Biswakarma. But more important, I was so impressed by the living legend, Mithai Devi Biswakarma, the legend, a Dalit woman who founded probably Nepal's, and in fact this region's, first Dalit women organization, which was exclusively led by women in the 1960s. And so when I'm looking at this, I think this needs a very important place in world literature. Right. And it was very unfortunate for me that Nepali people don't know these names. If at all they know, they are just citational, and probably people around us don't know. And for that, it's a tragedy. Because what we are missing out is, we are missing out an important organ of our body that can give us more beauty. We think our nose is wrong, but we don't know our nose is the most beautiful part of our face.
Of course.
So this kind of distortion of our own beauty standards has really emboldened me. And so to this next book, I hope to do the book that Srijana was talking about was Caste Matters.
Caste Matters, yes.
Caste Matters, the first launch was in Nepal. It was very interesting accident, but it turned out to be beautiful.
Because you were here in 2019, right?
2019, the book was out, and I was here. I was lecturing, and one of the YouTube's probably one of the most watched talks is what I give in Nepal, and the writing in this phase is now going to be more about thinking about individual biographies. And developing what a new knowledge means. And what I want to do really is, in this case, is inspire people, especially younger people, to take on the mantle. Because writing, thinking, speaking is like a conduct. You conduct yourself. And if you are a good conductor, like the one in orchestra, you can run it like a flawless show. So we ought to be the conductors of this space and not just be the mere audience. So I want to tell younger people across genres and across caste and religion and region to think of yourself as somebody who can do much more than just acting on a screen full of filters. When you go to any sites, our younger generation is, and this is the more, I don't want to criticize people of whatever, but you ought to think of yourself beyond filters. If you go on Instagram, TikTok, or anything, it's about what good filter you apply to, which means what more unoriginality I can present of myself. What if the filter is removed and what's your true self? I want them to feel comfortable in the true filter, seen through their mother and grandmother's eyes.
Of course.
And that you can feel when you go back to the hugs, to the warmth you can get in your parents and grandparents. That's the true beauty. And this is what I'm hopefully trying to do through some of my writings.
So I just want to ask something, like, because this has a global as well as a local connotation. We talk about rights, right? I mean, what you're advocating is Dalit rights, in a new light, the global light. What are the risks for the youth as they now transcend boundaries of casteism and all that, to look at the other case, or so-called traditionally upper caste,
Correct.
upper caste people,
Very good.
and say, well, they subdued us for a long time. Now it's our turn to reverse racism. What are the chances, the risk of that happening? Not just Nepal, not just India, the global situation, the underprivileged to now kind of reverse the trend and make that into another issue.
Correct.
What would you say about how do you prevent that from happening, for the youth especially?
That's a very beautiful question, Samar, and I think that's coming from a very good heart. But I think we have to be assured when it comes to people who have been marginalized historically,
Right.
that they would not reverse the system.
Right.
Because if they had to,
Right.
they would create civil wars in our society.
Of course.
If you look at the Dalit community in India, and they undergo atrocities. Now we have the Nabaraj B case, and this was very much a highlight. Similarly, we have incidences in India recently when Mr. Akshay Bhalera was killed because he celebrated Ambedkar's birthday, and he was killed, hacked to death. His intestines were just out. And yet, the Dalit community is teaching the world how to love
Right.
when there is hatred around you,
Right.
how to penetrate beauty in the bareness of ugliness. They're telling you how to embrace each other and not hate each other. And if you look at the record of Dalits, they're not asking for inequality. They're asking for equality. They're not asking for injustice.
Of course.
They're asking for justice. So when a group is advocating for equality and justice, rest be assured, the society is going to be in safe hands. If the groups ask for a dominance of a feudal society,
Right.
then we have to be worried. Now, people who have been historically part of a feudal regime, and Nepal has a big example of this,
Absolutely.
and they have mastered this. I was very shocked to learn that Prithvinarayan Shah here, we hear about Gorkhas as such legendary fighters, but the king from the community wanted to create Asal Hindustan. That's a big tragedy to really think about Nepali society to create an essentialist India, which meant to have a Hindu feudal caste India replicated in its pure form. And eventually, over several centuries, the kind of maturing of this politics has not changed. So I've seen people here, they dislike certain Indian politics, which is
Yes.
rightfully so,
Yes.
but they like India's caste system. Call it a tradition and call it a religion. Now that's a very difficult trend. We have to separate it. We have to really identify. And so if we have to think about what ought to be done, so this not be reversed,
Right.
and the fears that this is unjust system, now we want to be like this.
Of course.
Actually, the politics of Dalit is, it's unjust, let's make it like this. And for that, you ought to think about pushing much more Dalit representation in politics. I hope in the next decade, when I will come back to this show, there will be a Dalit prime minister.
Of course.
And that will be the kind of system we are hoping for, where equal distribution of resources, where respect of every person, irrespective of their gender, their sexuality, their region, the kind of ethnic, tribal, caste background they come from. I was very shocked to learn that when the Maoists came to power, there were at least 50 Dalit representatives in the parliament. In the next phase, they were reduced to 32. Now, there are only 16. Now you can see, I mean, approximately 20% of Nepal's population is not even there in the parliament. And so these fears are going to be reverberated if there is no representation. And it's going to create a potential political crisis. And the youth, if they don't see people like themselves represented, they're going to create much more problem to an already poor, deprived country. We can't afford. And I really hope Nepal comes to terms with their wrongs. They don't do what India keeps doing. They become a solid role model for rest of the world, and they really create a certain picture where people, irrespective of the caste or the Janajatis or people belonging to, and I was, the whole tri-state that we have, the Nevaris, the Khasaryas and the Madesis, the kind of division, yet these three groups have their own Dalits. How is it possible that we are advocating for our own rights, yet the most marginalized is still catching hell? Because you want them to clean your shoes, to be somebody who's making jewelries, to people who's making music, but you don't want them to be the prime ministers and the leaders, and not even the TV studios to be part of your compatriots. And I think we ought to change that.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough.
I'm so amazed of listening to him. So you are an example for the youth. So would you like to tell something for the youth? Like,
I think, you know, I love you, youth, because you are often a generation, each young generation is heterodox. It's not orthodox. It's not conservative. It's often thinking out of the box. It is not burdened with those experiences that adult generation has. And because of the rebelliousness, they are somebody who can really channelize the world that they want to. And the youth should start thinking whatever they are doing now is what they are going to reap in their old age or mid age. So don't think some grandfather is going to create laws for you that you have to follow. This is a very wrong approach. The grandfather is going to die in 10 or 20 years. Your life is another 50, 60 years. So you have to take responsibility from now onwards. Not just politics, in social issues, in cultural issues, but more importantly, whatever you do in your life, always have the vision of your family. You cannot have distance from your family. Of course, if the family is a troublemaker and problem maker, then you have to make your choices. But in general scope, your responsibility owes to them. Second, it is about your vocation, what you do. And third, and I think this clubs most importantly, is your reason for being there. Your responsibility towards your society. And if a youth of this age is ignited to take on important role, you have to think that you have to become role models for next generation. Samar is a role model for younger generations. Srijana is a model. Now they have to create their own role models for next generation. Our role models most likely have to be somebody who are almost within the age group of that we are, but let you not be consumed in cheap thrills and attention and attraction and likes and comments of the world. That's not what's going to define you and describe you. What defines and describes you is when you will stand one day in the middle of the night and think of yourself, you will be satisfied. And satisfaction doesn't come always from material gains. It doesn't come with how many doles I have in my pocket or how many cars, fleet of cars you have. That might be the measurement, but that's just a very cheap measurement. If you are comparing yourself from the Prince of Dubai, it's a very wrong comparison, because your status most likely is that you will never ever get too close to him to take. You might just be working under him. So if you really want to have an inspiration, be an inspiration somebody who is ethically upright, morally strong, spiritually grounded, and more importantly, somebody who will challenge the historical biases that your ancestors have given. So you have to challenge your ancestors, your mothers and parents. If they are doing wrong, you have to say, this is wrong, parents. You can't do this. If they are saying somebody of this caste, this tribe, and making discrimination based on one's ethnicity or color, you have to stand fruit and say you are wrong. And if they don't listen to you, threaten them that if you don't change, I might leave you. It's for good. And younger generation can change older generation, and older generation can direct the younger generation. It has to be a connection, but older generation has to be responsible as well. You see what I mean? Like they are holding on to something that they don't even create. Like someone, I want to ask this question: like, what is it that makes one responsible to attach oneself to caste?
Right.
What is it? You don't create. You have not created it. Leave it, because it's a burden. And let people from diverse background become the central actors.
Fantastic.
So actually we are coming to the end of the program, but still I would like to ask something. I've heard that you are working in cinema, so Could you please tell us something about your
Because
cinema?
she has a film background, so it's the last question for you from our point of view.
I think we might as well sign a deal after this.
Yes, I think so.
This is a film actually coming out of Hollywood, and probably this is the first time it's announced, and so it's going to hopefully come out later this year. It's in post-production phase.
Wow.
I am acting as my own role because they have a small role for me. But this film is phenomenally going to change the way we look at the world through relations of human beings. It goes to thinking about Nazism, and how Nazism is not just confined to Germany, but you can find it in North America, you can find it in European societies. Similarly, it looks at how caste, it's not just in South Asia, but it's penetrated into America, in other parts of the world. And so it's a very interesting mix, and made by a very legendary film director and producer, Ava DuVernay, who's a black filmmaker. She's a woman, and she's been making films on Martin Luther King, on the incarceration.
Wow.
I recommend you guys to, I mean, the films are a cause for change,
Yes.
not entertainment.
Yes.
So let's hope that comes out anytime soon.
Name of the movie?
It's still decided.
Okay.
But probably they're calling it Origins, but the name might change.
We look forward to seeing you on the big silver screen, and good luck to you in the future as you go ahead, and hope you enjoy Lumbini and Buddhism in the coming days also.
I hope everybody finds their own sense of Nibbana in their own life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time, Suraj.
Thank you so much,
We are
ma'am.
so happy to have you here.
This for you to
This
take
is something for
with
you taking out from the studio.
This is, and you know what I did? You guys did my name so correct. This is going to go in my Harvard office.
Oh.
Thank
I'm
you
going to put
so
in
much.
my.
And this is a magazine for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
both
so
of
much.
you.
Thank you so much for.
And thank you for joining our show.
Appreciate it.
So this morning live program हेरिरहनु भएको छ प्रोग्राममा हामीले डाक्टर सुरज सँग कुराकानी गर्यौं र उहाँसँग कुराकानी गरिसकेपछि म चाहिँ एकदमै अमेज पनि भएँ इम्प्रेस पनि भएँ र उहाँको पुस्तकहरू पढ्नुपर्छ जस्तो पनि मलाई लाग्यो अहिलेसम्म मैले पुस्तक चाहिँ पढाएको छैन अब चाहिँ म पढ्छु
जरुर।
है सो यति भन्दै एकैछिन हामी लाग्छौं ब्रेकतर्फ